I wish I was as flexible as you.
Well, looks like we're getting hurt out of this one. You get 6 months in, 9 months in, things are going great, and then something goes pop. You think, no, not again. You can get into positions that you probably don't have a right to be in.
Sounds really suspect.
Yeah.
It's time to stretch.
Welcome to You Can Fix You, giving you mobility tips to build movement freedom and train with confidence.
All right, Tom, episode 4. What is a Bendy Wendy?
A Bendy Wendy is the opposite of a fridge brick. The last time we covered the fridge brick, which is whenever you're horrendously inflexible.
Or as we like to call them, a Tom.
Atom. This week we are covering
A Jenni.
The Bendy Wendy, and a partial JP.
Definitely JP,
Quite flexible.
For sure.
Yeah, definitely taking the lead on this one. So hypermobility, being too flexible, it can have its upsides, but it can also have a lot of downsides. So a lot of people can say, "Oh, I wish I was as flexible as you," but is that a good thing, JP?
Sure. So being like horrendously flexible, you can get into positions that you probably don't have a right to be in. So you end up in these wonderful shapes. And
This sounds really suspect.
yeah. All right, Tom. People will come. I've got super flexible ankles, so I can sit in the bottom of a squat, but my hips aren't loaded. So when I'm starting to squat in CrossFit and stuff, which is quite a fundamental movement, I'm not necessarily getting the right stimulus from it. So I'm putting more force on my knees rather than loading and strengthening my hips, which is really where I want to target. Because you can be in a position, you can then get loaded there when you're not ready to support it. And that's when your joints kind of go, no, I don't like it.
Yeah, that was something I never experienced, like the likes of the clean.
Yeah.
If I get under a weight and clean it, I'll stand up with it. Like I've just enough elasticity and tension there to be able to get back up. But what I've really noticed with a lot of people with super flexible ankles, super flexible hips and stuff, is they get pinned and they
100%.
can't get up. They can't generate the strength there. So it's really, really interesting to see. It's like, oh wow, I wish I had a squat like yours. But I'm actually looking at that going, I'm glad I don't have a squat like that, because like I can actually get up out of the bottom now.
Yeah, because you can't get into the position to get hurt almost. Whereas, we're in there and we're like, well, looks like we're getting hurt out of this one. I think part of that as well is there's this perception that stretching is going to solve all your problems. So I don't think I'm inherently that flexible, but I spent so long trying to get flexible to solve my problems that I made the problems worse, because I was getting more and more range and less stability through the range. Especially like hamstrings, classic example, would really struggle to use them in a deadlift. So then your lower back takes all the pressure. So it's just trying to get that where you don't crave stretching all the time, where you can engage the muscles and load them the right way, is much more of a challenge.
Yeah, someone that's like naturally really flexible will gravitate towards stretching stuff because number one, they're like better at it than everyone else. And number two is that it gives that like temporary relief right away. Whereas you don't really realize that actually spending a ton of time doing a bunch of lunges and a bunch of hamstring activation exercises are actually going to make your muscles feel more relaxed, you know? So it's like feels so counterproductive, but in this weird way. So if you are someone who is really, really flexible and you're stretching all the time to try and make yourself feel less stiff, go full stability for a while. Use lunges, use hamstring sliders, work on deadlifts, work on building tension, and you'll actually find, over time, you'll actually feel your muscles actually become looser because things feel more stable and protected.
Yeah. And if you're ever in doubt which of these you are, if you're a fridge brick or a Bendy Wendy, and you do have access to SMM, it's very simple. If you find the first half harder,
you're a fridge brick.
You're a fridge brick. If you find the second half harder, you're a Bendy Wendy. It's pretty well divided that way. And a lot of times when we're trying to help people, they have a problem that's like, oh, I've still got this pain in my SI joint or whatever. And you're like, okay, how do you find the second half of SMM? Oh, that's way harder. Well, then spend time on it. Don't avoid it.
Then the flip side is like, if you are like the first half of SMM, it's like, well, how do you find that? And it's like, well, your hips aren't moving yet. You know, things can't move properly. So you're going to feel tight as well. So that's how it works in the fridge brick scenario.
So when we were looking at a fridge brick, we looked at different strategies they can use to improve their situation. So that we used like one side at a time, some breathing exercises, maybe adding weight. But do we have strategies like that for the opposite end, the more flexible?
Yes, control.
What?
Taking your time.
No, I don't want
So
to.
yeah, like a great example, JP used there, like the squat, being able just to sit down and rest on your calves, essentially, just sit in your ankles. What you want to do, if you're able to do things like that, is yes, go to that position and then come up half an inch.
You evil man.
Yep. And can you hold that? So you're almost like, you go to the end range and then be like, right, let's back off a tiny bit. And then when you're wibbly wobbling, that's where you're going to start to build that strength and start to use really, really slow squats. In terms of the shoulders, use really slow presses, slow pulls, really own each part of the movement. Treat yourself like a ninja. So you want to be able to move completely silently and slowly, and then you're going to be able to build up that strength and stability and tension. Which is then going to make your level of flexibility more of an advantage then, because imagine having control over all the things you can do. Like that's incredible. Like it becomes a much more of a strength then.
Yeah, especially if we're looking at something with hypermobility, which is really a connective tissue issue, is being really patient at those beginner like progressions or regressions, whatever you look at it, is those starting steps. Spend maybe longer on them than you think you should. Let your joints kind of catch up to your strength before we start to progress things along. And things like adding artificial resistance, so adding tempo and pauses that hold you back from adding more weight too quickly, are great ways to kind of work on that. Yeah.
And like I'll say it all the time, like milk exercises, milk weights, like try and get as much as you can from using a variation of a movement before you just go to the weight, because the weight will come eventually. And if you do all those things and get a little bit fancy with it for a while, then when you do go to just progressive loading, you'll find you don't plateau as quick because you're able to adapt. So like if you've practiced coming up from a squat that takes you like 30 seconds to come up from, then all of a sudden when you've got like a heavy weight in your back and it's taking you longer to get up, you've at least been there before. You know, this isn't like the first time you've ever had to squat for that long. You've had that practice before. So it really does carry over long term.
Yeah, because I remember hearing you and Jenni talk about when you started to train Jenni, it was like watching someone who could do things, but like get sore doing them. And that's such a mind, in the same way for fridge bricks, there's a mindset to where like you feel embarrassed. It's like, I don't want to do it because I feel bad. For people who are super flexible, whatever, they almost get an ego hit off being able to do it, but then that's instantly crushed whenever every time they do it, they get hurt. Yeah. So it's trying to like manage your mindset on both ends of the scale. It's just with different kind of parameters.
Yeah. And it's that almost like, for me being inflexible, it was like a feeling of embarrassment because I couldn't do the thing. Yeah. But then, what I would notice with a lot of people that would like get hurt easily because of being like too flexible, they would feel weak. They would feel like, you know, I can't do what everyone else can do. And that's, you know, demoralizing in its own way as well, you know, so.
Then they restrict themselves like, oh, I can only do yoga or I can only do these like disciplines that are in their wheelhouse. Yeah. When really you're trying to look, well, what's the opposite of what I'm good at? And then
the funny thing is like you need to train in this like way of like starting off slow with tempo and build things up gradually. But it's like in realistic terms, I don't know. That should be how everyone trains at the start. Yeah. Everybody should you should move slower when you first start. Before you start jumping, you should start to see, can you land softly? Can you do a little bit, before you actually go all in on something. So it's just a more sensible way to do things. But unfortunately with beginner gains, you'll make progress really fast with anything that you try that you're new to. So it's just like thinking the long term. If you start something new, you want to be doing it in 10 years time. Yeah. So like take the first year to like build a foundation that you can play with for 9 years rather than like crash and burn.
So from my sporting background, there was an interesting look at how you approach training. There's the East and the West have different approaches. The West is all about that like instant gratification. We want to see more weight go in the bar. We want to see more advanced progressions. Whereas the East has a bigger culture of respect, where it's like you learn as an apprentice for, a decade as opposed to a month. And so you spend a year using just a brush shaft before you can use a barbell, all that stuff, so that all the basics are refined. And as a result, they progress faster in the long run because they've got that solid foundation built up. But it's just a clash of cultures. I always find that quite interesting.
Yeah.
Similar to our fridge bricks, who we're looking at like, well, how long do we expect to see change? Like, you got to put a lot of effort in at the start. Is that the same for kind of flexibility, hypermobility? Is it different? What have we got there?
It's going to take longer. You have a good thing memorized on like the changes of connective tissue and everything. Yeah, this is a good rant. Yeah.
So it takes 30 days for skin cells to regenerate. All new skin in 30 days. It takes your muscles 90 days. So it's 3 months, which is why a lot of strength cycles tend to be 3 months. It takes connective tissue like 270 days. That's like 9 months. So 3 complete strength cycles before your connective tissue has done 1. And for me, that's a perfect analogy of why you should go so slow when you start, to let your connective tissue get like properly adapted to your strength. Otherwise, you'll get 6 months in, 9 months in, things are going great, and then something goes pop. You think, no, not again.
The brakes are on.
Yeah. So I find it useful to see from a biology point of view, well, why is this happening? Oh, well, then that makes it easy to know I can add a kilo this month. I can add a kilo the next month. That's how I built a Jefferson curl up. I was doing like 50 kilos with it because it just each month added 1 or 2 kilos. Just took a few years to do it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's the movements like the Jefferson curl that, you know, you're not in an advantageous position to pull a ton of weight. Mm-hmm. You just need to go way, way, way slower with them. So in terms of being too flexible, hypermobile, you want to be taking that time so that you're not accidentally going to be loading something up that your body can't tolerate, because then that's where you end up, you're going to be forced to rest anyway. Yeah. So it's better to do the boring work, take the time and build it up gradually.
Yeah. And the nice thing about that sort of thinking slow is that, especially if you're inflexible, if you're flexible, you're more likely to be kind of a slower athlete, less explosive, because when you are explosive is when you're probably most likely to get hurt, because that sort of peak tension just goes way above what you're able to do in that position. You've had a one-to-one client with this.
Yes, this is a really, really good example. So when we first started working together, basically told, don't do anything, rest this, don't move your shoulders, don't do this, don't do that. It was just all don't, you can't, you have to be careful, blah, 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 blah.
Yep.
When we first started working together, it was like, well, what can you do? And she was able to move her joints. She was able to move her arms, able to move her hips. Yeah. Okay. It was only whenever she started trying to add a bit of load or train or do something like that there, she would get injured. So we literally started off with tins of beans. That was it. Like, okay, we're going to move your shoulders, but you're going to have a tin of beans in your hands. And that's what we started off with. And within a few weeks, things started feeling better. Nice. Muscles started feeling more relaxed. So he had someone with like chronic pain, sore all the time, couldn't move without getting hurt, just starting off with literal tins of beans and building on that. And that's where we had to start from. And then, you know, a few weeks later, message, she just started the other programs, doing other things and being like, this is amazing. I can actually do stuff. And it was just through removing that fear and just showing, you know, where to start from. Because it's the hardest thing for so many people. It's like, where do I need to start from? And it's like, this simple. And it's like, really? And it's like, well, yeah. And it's like, as soon as you go, well, okay, then that's when you actually start making progress. Whenever you go, all right, I'll do the silly thing that looks like it won't do anything. Yeah. Because that's the thing that does the things. It's the thing that looks like it won't do anything, done for long periods of time, that does the things.
Yeah, like a tin of beans.
Like a tin of beans.
Who'd think you'd look at a tin of beans? That's not going to do anything, but it really does.
Yeah, that got me to the dumbbell.
That's cool. So then we had another win come through from a lady called Valerie. Hi all, I'm Valerie. A little late to introduce myself, but after many years of hypermobility and dysfunctional yoga and daily movement patterns, it was time. I took on SMM a couple of months ago, and at 61, I can't believe how much stronger I feel and how much less pain I have. Even when I have a twinge, I know what to do to reset. And we've talked about that before, like setbacks and flare-ups are so frequent when you're starting out. It's not something to avoid. It's just accept that it's going to be part of the process. There are ways to get through it. She has a long way to go, but her observation is that the dysfunctional patterns are becoming more and more subtle. Thank you, Tom, for changing lives, and thank you for all of the daily inspiration.
Oh,
that's awesome.
Love that. Yeah. And that's like, you know, at 61, like, it's
Yeah.
a big deal. Like you can start at any time. Your body can always learn. I always say this thing, like you're not a car that like needs bits replaced. You have this living organism that can be taught differently. It can be shown that's not right. Do it this way. And it will learn if you give it the right inputs. Yeah. That's so important to remember.
Your potential at any age is usually much higher than you expect. Yes, it will degenerate over time, but it doesn't mean that you're tapped out at the age that you're currently at.
Yeah. Cool. Good place to leave that one.
So